I'm Grace, this is Claire. We're the founders of our organization Growing Garden. We focus on helping kids grow their critical thinking and creative skills through our hosting events throughout our community.
Yeah, and we found that your purpose and what you established within your curriculum really aligned with our interests. So we're just gonna ask a few questions, but before we begin, we want to ask what you do and who you are within this field.
Okay. So my name is Gillian Berard, and I call myself the holistic education architect because I really think that education is a craft, right? And a dance that you play, and being able to seamlessly weave academic subjects through inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, practical life skills, gardening, homestead skills, baking, cooking, entrepreneurship, all of those things. So how can we take curriculum expectations and really flip what classroom and what we think school should be, right? We have it in our heads like this is what school is, but in reality, it could look so different. So what I'm trying to do is really trying to change people's perception of what school could be. So I'm a mother. I have two kids, and I've been working in education with French immersion in elementary for the past 10 years. I was also a math coach too. And now I'm working with more nature-rooted alternative education on helping them build their math programs that really align with their environment and yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
That's really cool. Could you tell us what led you towards nature specifically?
I just think we've been so disconnected, disconnected from nature, disconnected from our intuition. And I think we do that from a really, really early age with the kids, that we're keeping them inside, indoors 90% of the day, under fluorescent lights, not outdoors enough, not getting connected to nature. And we're also expecting kids to be, respect nature, even though they're not fully immersed in it. So I think that really needs to shift. And I'm really big into health and wellness. And really for our mental health, nature is one of the most powerful tools for that. And I see a lot of the time, we talk about mental health and we have this crisis that's happening, and we're spending so much money on, in my opinion, band-aid solutions later on when the outcomes are already happening. But we really need to look at root cause and what's actually happening in here, and what at the start of education can we do in changing the structure of education so that we don't have these issues that arise. And I know there's very many factors involved, but I think that being so disconnected from nature is one of them. And so I've seen how can we weave academic subject through play, through inquiry, and through the outdoors. That's really, really my mission for all kids and schools, to really change the script on what school could be.
That's a really good perspective. That's really cool.
So we just have a few questions we also want to ask too. So ever since you switched more into becoming nature-based and kind of deviating from the school curriculum, what methods do you feel are very important in addressing to those children specifically to help expand their capacities and abilities to success?
What helps, do you think, with their memory retention the most when you teach? Because we find that it's hard to teach
memory retention. I like this one because I've read a lot of books about memory retention, and even just how cognitively the brain works and how it learns. But I've also seen this in my experience that kids need to embody learning. They need to do the learning, that have that physical experience, which we've really cut out. It's more either you see it on a paper pencil task, or it's on a device and they're seeing it visually. And I think the reason why, and I've talked to a lot of educators of why we're seeing a gap, or the memory retention kind of thing, is that they're not embodying the experience. And I have worked as a teacher in public education for a long time, so I completely understand, when you have classes of 34 kids and you feel like your hands are tied because you have all these things you need to get done, you don't have the proper outdoor space to go to. So I'm not saying it's the teacher or this, it's really the structure of education. And I'm looking at it more like a bird's eye view of what needs to be changed. And I think that's one of the biggest ones. Kids need time to create, to get curious, and give them space to do that. But we don't really allow that in public education. There's always a time limit on something. We have this subject and this subject and this subject, like there's no time to create there. And I think that if we just actually trusted the kids in their learning process and let them embody a learning experience too, that holds the memory, I think, in my opinion.
For sure.
And just what I've seen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know we see that trend of kids being pushed into school at like an earlier age, and like the classes are so large. So like we're thinking to ourselves, like, how can parents support the type of like conceptual based learning that you advocate, or like integrate that into their lives with children like so early in like preschool and earlier preschool?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard one. It's a hard one because I think as parents, and like me having my own kids, is that we are really in charge and we have a choice on what we want to do with our kids, and we have to be okay with that. And more we're seeing a lot of options come up, and I think options are important for parents because they're in the power of what do I value for my kids and where do I want to send them. So I think options are important. I always tell parents, model curiosity around your kids, have them do stuff with you, if they're at school all day and then you're just rushing to sports all the time, like, are they doing those practical life skills with you? Like, can we slow things down a little bit and do those things with them? Because I know for me, I just want to get them done to keep my household running. But how can I really incorporate, my kids during that process too in learning? And I just think that more and more people are starting to look for different options. There's a massive shift in education happening right now. It's been happening for a long time, but especially right now, I find. And so parents will have more and more options for what they want to do with their kids. And I think it's really important that the parents have the power and the choice of what they want to do based on their values, right? And it might look different for different people, and that's okay. But I do, in my opinion, think that it's really important for kids to learn practical life skills, to be connected to nature, to be outdoors more, to be moving. There's a lot of sedentary learning, and I don't think that's good for kids' health. And I think that we're seeing the impacts of it as well. A lot of technology, a lot of sitting and learning. And I think we're seeing that with the kind of mental health crisis that we're in.
We are, for sure.
Oh, I have another question. So you said you wanted to have base it off more of like a holistic perspective, but what led you really into connecting that with nature? So like your overview of the curriculum, like how did you want to connect that to your curiosities or interests with nature?
So when I say holistic education, like for me, I think people have different kind of perspectives on what it is and what it means. And for me, it's really obviously like mind, body, spirit, like your mental, the cognitive learning things that you're learning, the physical experience. So being outdoors and interacting with nature, like that's a big part of it too. And then the emotional regulation, like emotional intelligence, I want to say almost with that. And that you learn how to regulate being outdoors in nature, like that. There's so much happening while you're outdoors. Specifically with nature, but also while you're going through a project or you're building something outside or you're taking care of animals, like problems arise and you have to be resilient, or you have to overcome things, you have to problem solve. So those are all the types of skills that we need to be developing. And through that, you are learning academic content, really. Like there's a lot of math and literacy involved and so much science involved, social studies, history, like all the subjects are embedded there. They're just not in a timetable like in a day at school, right? So I would say that the academic side is there. I see it because I know curriculum really well. I read it for fun. It's just what I do. And it sounds weird to people, but it's just something that I like to do. So curriculum, like Ontario specifically, because that's where I am, you can weave curriculum through. And I just made a resource called Garden Math. And I took all the expectations from the Ontario curriculum and I put it in there. So every single strand is in there. Not all of the expectations at all as means, but it was just to kind of show people that, oh, you can actually do math outside. So the reason why I created this resource is that I want to put light bulbs in people to see that curriculum doesn't have to be done in four walls in a classroom. It can be done through a project of creating a garden, serving your community. And there's so much more other than just math to tap into that. So the emotional regulation piece, the cognitive learning of the academic side of it, but then also the physical embodiment experience that you're getting and the wellness aspect in that sense. So it kind of touches all of those pieces. And I think as the guide, as the educator, it's your job to pull those things out when you want to, when it's best for your kids. And it's not going to look the same at this school, this school, this school, in this environment, because all the kids are different. But to highlight, what skills, what emotional intelligence skills are you developing? What academic skills are you developing through this process? And what physical experience are we having through this? So it's really the guide, the teacher's job to highlight those things along the way. But I would say just in terms of gardening, because that's the resource I just put out, that's what I'm really interested in. That's what holistic means to me.
Okay, wow, that's really good. It's really impressive how like you're involved in all the subjects and you're clearly passionate about the children's health. It's really cool. So
Yeah.
could you share with us like what you say like your favorite or like your most effective method was or project was when you teach kids?
Ooh, I've had some really, really, really good ones with kids. I think I really like when all the kids are doing kind of different projects at the same time, because I think that's true inquiry, but we're all under the umbrella of the same essential question, is what I call it, or open-ended questions. So we talked about like, how does the past affect the future? So we did this really big, so it's open-ended, and a lot of the different kids dive into different things. Some people were creating like boats, because they were creating like a boat that was like going down the Nile. Talking about like, so they were talking about like transportation and how that worked. Whereas another group was looking more at like the fashion industry in that time, but also the fashion industry at our time now and how it's so wasteful, right? Like we are still talking about environment here and what did they do before and why are we here where we are? And but look at all these companies that are trying to change things too. So there's a lot of movement in that sense. And then I had just different groups looking at different parts of culture, but we actually got into so much math and so much literacy, so much social studies and history and geography. So it was really all of these subjects under this question as how does the past affect the future? Like that was kind of the big question. And they also all went through it. And we talked about, the food industry too was another big one. Like what did people do in the past? Like they didn't have Tim Hortons at the corner here to go get food from. They didn't have the grocery store. So what tools did they have to create, like when they were gardening as well, because we're making garden beds and stuff. And it just, I think it was really reflective for them to see, because everything has changed so much. Everything is so fast paced now and instant gratification. We want everything at the tip of our fingers. And it kind of just slowed things down a bit to see what they were doing in the past and how they were so connected with nature and they were so connected with land and how we've become so disconnected with land. And so how can we, bring that back a little bit, right? Because we've gone too far, right? So I think that was a really, really interesting one because it brought in kind of all aspects of it. Kids were building different things and investigating different things, but nature really came out in that one as well. And then the kind of how we analyzed it, the big conclusion that we drew really came down to we've been so disconnected from nature. Like that's it. So that was like the big learning, and that's what I wanted the outcome to be too, right? So, and now what can we do moving forward?
Okay, yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So when you say that like you're like learning too fast and like it's like such a high pace, I remember you saying previously that memorization and like facts flashcards are like kind of counterproductive. So like, but slower thinking, would you say that puts children at a disadvantage?
Yeah, if your classroom values fast thinking, then it does put slower thinking at a disadvantage. And people think that getting an answer faster means that they're smarter, and that's really not true. Some people need to sit and think about things for a while, and that doesn't mean that they're not as smart. The guy who won, actually, I don't know his name at the top of my, I should look it up, but he won like the math award of like the world, like, you know, like the Stanley Cup of the math awards. And he said that in grade 11, he felt stupid because he was so slow at coming to the answer. And so it just shows that just because you're slower thinker, it's not even that you're slower thinking, you're just processing things and you're like strategizing and thinking about things.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it doesn't mean that. And what happens to those kids is that they don't get a chance, like they don't get a voice, right? And it's like, oh, I'm not smart enough because I didn't get it fast enough, and faster is better. So really creating that, you have to like really set the tone and creating that culture of what does it mean to be a mathematician? Like what skills do I need? What is it that I can memorize flashcards fast? Because that's really the lowest form of thinking, right? So it's important as the guide to bring in higher order thinking questions. So it's not just this and this equals that, right? Because in life, you don't always have this and this, and you're just trying to look for the answer. A lot of the times you don't have any of the pieces and you're trying to solve a problem. So, or you want to solve a problem, you know the outcome, but you don't know all the pieces. So there's different information missing. So, yeah, in my opinion, we really need to come away from flashcards. I'm not saying kids should not know their facts. Absolutely, they need to know their facts, and absolutely they need to be automatized. They need to be quick to at a certain point, but the progression of getting there is really important. And we just skip because in our world we want everything so quickly. We want them to know this and this and this and this and this, but we skip that whole the strategizing and the process of learning. That these skills aren't developed here. So it actually hurts them later on. And I've seen it so many times that it will kind of hinder.
Yeah, for sure. Because like we're high schoolers and a junior year right now.
But we
like,
still feel that
struggling.
way.
We're like
Cool.
slammed with all the information with little time. So we definitely
Yeah.
know where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, another question I had to that answer was that you focus a lot on your books and resources on like kindergarten or like young children. And since you mentioned like that example of 11th grader, are you willing in the future to expand more to like high school or more advanced curriculum that you want to like implement so that they have more of like a holistic perspective?
Yeah, for right now, I do K to 6 right now, kindergarten to grade 6. I will expand more to grade 7, 8. And then I would love to work with someone too who could help me expand further. It's just a lot that I'm doing, but I do think that it is possible. And there are a lot of people actually who want to change how things are. But I know a lot of people feel like their hands are tied because of the situation that they're in. And I've felt that. I totally understand that. So eventually takes time.
For sure. If you
Yeah.
have, be like a reassured. So for your books, we noticed that you did publish a lot. Could you tell us about your books and like when you do like your research, like your thought process behind your like motivation behind that?
Yeah, so it's geared to like towards like K to 5 usually. So it's usually the younger stuff, but I do get into junior stuff. And my thought process behind it is just when I started gardening, I just noticed that there was a lot of math involved. So I kind of just took myself through the process of someone who was going to start gardening. What would they do? Well, you have to start with seed starting. And through that, my thought process was, okay, I don't want questions that are just this, then this plus this. Like I don't want just or this minus this equals that. Like let's talk about thoughtful questions and make it more of a discussion as well. So it's not just like there's one answer. There could be multiple answers, but this is my opinion. This is your opinion. We have to actually defend our opinions right now on why I would do this certain way. So the questions that I crafted were more open-ended as well. Like I try to open them up a little bit. And I've been inspired by other mathematicians as well that have done this. And so there are 12 different problem structures. So I kept in mind that I wanted to do that throughout the process as well.
For sure.
So to keep it mixed up a lot.
Okay. And I think we're gonna slowly start wrapping up because you did cover a lot within your statements. One of the reasons we wanted like to interview lots of like credible people like you is because we wanted to like gain perspective or like insight on like how older generations like try to address like holistic perspective learning. But how do you think younger generations such as us can really prioritize this lesson within our communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it's all about coming together as community. And I think it's about you guys like creating something like this or volunteering at schools or, sharing what you think about how schools should be or your experience and how you would want it differently. And working within your community on also talking about, okay, well, if we're doing initiatives for gardening and planting, why don't we bring in some academic stuff as well? Like, so sharing that with kids of highlighting where math is, where literacy is, where science is, and we don't have to just sit in a desk and, you know, go through a schedule every single day. I can actually learn all that while I'm outside today. So I think just advocating for that and talking about it and sharing and coming together as a community is really big.
We really
Yeah.
appreciate you like talking to us so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for talking with us.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.